And welcome in again to the Bobby Carpenter Show featuring my man, Anthony Schlegel. Week 2 is in the books in college football, and there's a lot that we have to discuss. Bucks are 2-0, and Schlegs, the best part about going 2-0, well, you know it, it's a chance to go 3-0. So they'll be having the opportunity to do that against Western Kentucky coming up this Saturday. We've got a lot to dive into with Youngstown State, where the Buckeyes were able to get going. Could they get their skill position players? Could they get Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka going in the right direction and get them going the way that they want? And then also, a lot of things happened around college football, as they always do, and that is the best part about it, because no one knows what's going to happen each and every week, and we're always surprised. It is a must-see TV. My man Schlegs, how are we doing? How do we consume the game? And what were our initial reactions and responses as you watched the Buckeyes and then some of the other college football games?
My brother, man. Hey, Buckeye Nation. Great to be with you. All right. So initial reaction, 35-7. Okay. There's a lot of good things. There's a lot of things that still need to be corrected. And I digested those. My son and wife looked at me like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I want to watch another game. I'm like, no, you will watch this game. We are watching this game because the Bobby Carpenter Show featuring my man, Anthony Schlegel. So we're watching it. Okay. And then it got over and I'm trying to digest it. And I didn't tweet this time during the game because I wasn't at 35,000 feet drinking some, Wild Turkey 101. And I was just trying to consume it. And then it started to consume me. So I got into the shop that's right here behind me. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to bang out some shoulders and fletch some arrows while I digest this game before the Texas game. And then I continued in the Texas game. So initial impressions, I love the fact that we're throwing the ball vertical. I love the fact that Marvin Jones got a 71-yard touchdown. He should have
Marvin Harrison, but either way.
Marvin Harrison, what did I say?
Marvin Jones. It's cool.
Oh, my bad. I just saw him on TV. Anyways, Marvin Harrison Jr. had 2, should have had 3. There was a PI that wasn't called. I thought, secondary played very well. There's a couple times we were in man coverage. Here's the thing, though. Denzel Burke, welcome back to the club. First cornerback to have a pick since 2021. That's a good sign. He's playing healthy. And the best thing about him that I saw, Bob, from a secondary position, in the past, our guys have looked very scared being around the ball. There's some things that they can clean up and they can correct. Like, listen, you can't look back for the ball when you're not in phase with the man. So if the guys are in a real route, guess what? Go get in phase with the dude before you look back for the ball. But there are some other things, Bob, that we're going to dive into as we really break down this game. What about you? What are your initial thoughts?
Well, there's some run fit stuff that we can get into. It was encouraging to see them get Marvin Harrison Jr. involved and also Emeka Egbuka. Both of those guys really, I wouldn't say were absent in the first game, just didn't necessarily have the big plays that you'd like to see.
Right.
It was almost surprising because I felt like Youngstown State had a better offense after watching that game than Indiana did. Maybe that's due to the guys looking at it as Youngstown State, and maybe they weren't quite as dialed in as you were for a non-conference game on the road. But some of the run fits were a little shaky. Some of the things weren't exactly great. And listen, we'll have a ton of time to get into all of that. But yeah, it didn't feel as good as I thought it would. 28-7.5. I'm like, all right, second half, they'll put down the accelerator and pull away in a big way. And that never really developed the way that I thought it would. And that maybe was a little disappointing. I know Ryan was trying to get some Devin in there, get some of the other quarterback, or get the other quarterback, Devin Brown, in and rotate guys through. And he talked about that at halftime. He was very honest about it, his willingness and desire to try to share the wealth and spread it around. So I think some of the substitutions in the second half, but I know that there were a lot of people out there that wanted to see some of these young players. And I think you got a chance to see some of the young linebackers out there that everybody wanted to see, and you felt better about it. See some of the young defensive backs, see some of those young D linemen moving guys around. And so I also like the fact that when you're bringing in Devin Brown and you're bringing other receivers and your other running backs and everybody else, you kept your starting offensive line in there because those guys, they had some work that they needed to get done. So
yes, they did.
There's a lot that we can dive into. We're going to take a short break here, but when we get back, we're going to talk about some of the headlines, some of the things that went the Buckeyes' way, some of the reactions, stuff that everybody wanted to ultimately see, and did it come to fruition, and how concerned should we be moving forward? It's the Bobby Carpenter Show here on the Big Play Network with my man, Anthony Schlegel. All right, we're going to recap now the Buckeyes versus Youngstown State. They win the game, Schlegs, 35-7. Everybody sees that. How
Yep.
good do you feel about it? What were your biggest positives that you saw from the game? And then potentially what were some of your biggest concerns as well?
Okay, buddy. Well, we're going to go back and forth on this. And one, we talked about McCord and Harrison hooking up in high school, 3 state championships. They hooked up twice. They could potentially had 3 touchdowns in the game. That was very positive. One thing that stands out to me, and I hope that everybody that has kids sees this, but I saw Ballard down there as a gunner. I saw Sony Styles going down and getting a tackle on kickoff. Listen, when you're a younger guy, go add value and be a football player. And how does that happen? That it starts on special teams. So that really juiced me up. Okay. So that's 1. 2, Denzel Burke. Guess what? Playing really good. He's healthy. So guess what? Hancock, Igbenessum, like, you're going to get work this season because the dude's a dog, right? So they're going to start throwing your way. So get your mind right because you're going to get some work. I think Tommy Eichenberg's playing like an All-American like he should. Here's the deal, though. The defense had a hard time versus Youngstown State concerning, right, getting off the field and finishing blitzes. And then also I heard a lot of people talking about why are we blitzing all these dudes? It's Youngstown State. And we'll talk about the Texas game later, Bob. But, like, why are we not getting there with 4 down linemen? That's just from the defensive side of the ball. We only got 2 sacks in the season right now, Bob. So what are you thinking?
So Indiana, we look back 2 weeks ago, they definitely want to get the ball in their hand early. And so when you do that, it's going to limit your ability to get sacks.
Yes.
But as I sat there, and we'll talk about that Texas-Alabama game, but I talked to my dad about it. He goes, Texas just dominated them up front. I mean, that was the reality. And they have 2 sacks. Mike Hall had the 1 sack. Tommy Eichenberg got the other sack in the game. Like, you need to be able to generate pressure with your 4 down. And you start talking about JT Tuimoloau, start talking about Jack Sawyer, start talking about Mike Hall, like all of the guys that they can roll through there. And those are probably the 3 most premier guys. You talk about pass rushing, highly recruited dudes that have been productive. Those guys need to go produce. And maybe it's some scheme. Maybe you need to let them go a little bit more, on 3rd down. Maybe you don't need to blitz as much because when you blitz, it takes away from the D lineman's ability to be able to do things.
Yes,
and
it does.
Because they can get the ball out quicker, there's more readily available options. And sometimes, you have to stay contained. You have to do other stuff where you can run some games and stuff up front if your line is really good. And so that's the other piece of it is how are we attacking it? What is our MO? What are we going to be known for with all that? I agree with you with Denzel Burke, with how well he played.
Yes.
Hancock, I think, is going to do a good job. I really think he's a talented player. Igbenessum is very, very skilled as well. And those guys are going to continue to improve. And I love the competition that they'll have in the room, Schlegs. There was some positives. Getting Marvin going, as we talked about, was great. Travion Henderson, I thought, looked tremendous. His ability to sidestep and then get vertical.
Yes.
That's something that, you talk about guys dancing. I think last year, combination of limited reps during practice, he's battling a foot and a toe and different things. And so you don't necessarily see those clean looks. And you watch him this week, sidestep and then shot out of a cannon, able to get downhill and make those big explosive plays. He did a fantastic job. And I was very, very impressed with his ability, to be able to run the football. He only had 5 carries, but
5 carries, Bob.
56 yards, though, 2 touchdowns. He was very effective at getting vertical. So I really liked what he was able to do there. So that was a positive. I thought the offensive line made some strides. I thought they did a better job in some areas. Now, granted, we have to keep in mind and take into account Schlegs, the opponent you're dealing with. But other the offensive line did play a little bit cleaner. We're able to do some things. I do think that there are still some issues with the offense as far as the passing game, and they've got to get that figured out. And I don't know, they pushed it a little bit more, but I don't know if we've fully seen, this fully operational Death Star that Ohio State can ultimately be. We got to see a little bit of what Marvin can do. We got to see a little bit of what Mecca can do. And I don't know if it's a confidence thing or what it is with the quarterbacks, but it feels like you've got to kind of turn them loose. And maybe if you name Kyle the starter, that'll help it. But you tell me, Schlegs, on your thoughts about how you kind of see it with these quarterbacks battling it out, and if that's impacting their ability to play fast and loose.
I would say the first touchdown, what do? They put Emeka and Marvin on the same side, right? So that creates a mismatch. You got a corner and a safety. Who are you going to pick? Even if you want to go man with a safety over top and bracket one, you're going to be man on the other one. So I like the combination of that. One thing I do not like is please stop running toss into the boundary. For some reason, our boundary game, guys are slanting into it. Stop doing that. And that you look at the one home run that he hit on the side. it seems to me when our guys can stretch, or in our inside run game where Trevion had that touchdown, that really good hard-nosed run, he put his foot in the ground and he exploded vertical. The one that we went to the sideline, to the wide side of the field, and that's the other benefit of being at college, the hash marks are wider. So when you get there, again, the game is a game of pace, space, and angles. And it's all about how do you get better athletes in space on lesser athletes. And when you go to the field side, I think that our offensive line has a greater ability of being able to try to get to the second level. That's something that we have to see, and it has to get better for us to operate. However, I think that our comfort zone based on this last game is our vertical passing game. A positive that I saw is I saw a running back out of the flat. Like that was fantastic, like to the side. That's great. I would love to see more screens to the running back. I would love to see the running backs be, because they can all catch the ball and get vertical. That needs to be an option. But then we also had go ahead, Bob.
Great you bring that up, because Mayan, like, you don't really think of Mayan Williams as, as a receiver. He's a thick dude. He's a little smaller. People look at him in short yardage. But the reality is, I love Mayan's got soft hands, man. You watch him catch that ball over his shoulder. Like he does a tremendous job in the pass game. And all of those guys do. Trevion does. And you look at what Chip Trainum does. Like, those three guys can all be triple threats as far as, they're blocking, they're running, and they're obviously they're receiving. So they all have those weapons. And I think it's a function of just trying to figure out exactly what you have. And I don't know if Ryan and Brian are really honed in on exactly what they want to do. And it seems almost right now, Schlegs, like it's a little bit of an exploration process of, hey, we think we're good at this. We think we're good at that. Let's try some of these things out. Let's work through it. Meanwhile, trying to win the game, because Ryan talks about that being the most important piece.
100%.
But functionally trying to get better as the season goes, because there will be games where you will have to be better than you were this week. And the only way you can do that is improving and maybe finding out some of your strengths and your weaknesses.
Yeah. The other thing too is you can't also kill yourself through penalties, right? I mean, a hands to the face on a touchdown, a 3rd and short, and a holding penalty.
And that was bad. That was not a questionable call. Like,
no, it was not.
Pop a dude's helmet off. I mean, that's real.
That's laziness. Just reset your hand under the breastplate. You already blocked.
You know what that is, Schlegs? That's the difference.
I know, it's right behind me. And guess what? They got a ton of them, so just use them. But again, Ryan talked about it. This game has come down to a game of possession. Youngstown State had the ball 8 minutes longer than Ohio State did. Guys, listen, we only had 9 offensive possessions. They talked about it the week before. I think they had 9 or 10 versus Indiana. The year before, they had 15. So there's 2 things. Offensively, you have to be able to sustain drives. And defensively, you have to be able to get off the field. So another concern was when we are blitzing and we do have people in the backfield, you have to get them down. So there's 2. So tackle people in the backfield, get off the field on defense, and you have to sustain drives on offense. You can't beat yourself on penalties, Bob.
Well, I thought they weren't bad. Well, they have 6 for 65. That's not terrible. You remember how bad the penalties were last year. It was much worse. So, the most notable one is the Josh Simmons head to the hands of the face. Like, that's just a bad situation, or Justin Simmons rather. But you talked about getting off the field. Do you know what Ohio State was on 3rd downs?
I forgot. No,
it's okay. 5 for 12 offensively. So not terrible.
Not great. Not great either.
Here's the thing. This team was above 50% last year. So you got used to them being above 50%, which you're talking when you get in the high 40s, low 50s, you're talking best in the nation then at that point.
Right.
So they're 5 for 12. So not bad. It wasn't like they're hovering around 33%, but not where they're at. And then what if I told you Youngstown State was 7 of 15? I think that's the more concerning thing is you looked at the down and distances that Youngstown State was able to get into, and the fact that they were able to continue to convert them, that to me was probably the bigger problem, because you start talking about only having 9 possessions and then giving up the time of possession battle, whatever it was, 26 to 34 minutes. Yep. And that's a rough estimate. But the reason was you did pretty well on 3rd down. But Youngstown State did a pretty darn good job. They were probably a smidge better than you, which shouldn't be the case. And I give Doug Phillips, their head coach, a lot of credit. I mean, he had a great game plan. He's an Ohio guy. He was at Ohio State. He knew what this game was going to be. He knew how to manage it, and he knew how to kind of handle everything. And so with that, he wasn't going to let that game get out of control. And he had some tricks up his sleeve. And so it wasn't like they got burned a lot. Obviously the 1 touchdown you give up, but outside of that, they were pretty good. but they've got to get better on third down. And we'll get into some of the different things. And there's some fan questions we have as we dive into it and try to figure out exactly what's going on with some of the issues. And believe me, Schlegs, we're picking nits here because at Ohio State, you have the ability to do that because the expectations are always up here. The standard is the standard, and the standard is national championships. And speaking of national championships, 2 of the big blue bloods in college football squared off. We're going to talk some headlines around the college football landscape as we dive into that on the Bobby Carpenter Show, featuring my man Anthony Schlegel right here on the Big Play Network. All right, welcome back in. Talked a lot of Ohio State. Curious to see the rankings. Everything comes out where they're at. Slid obviously from 3 to 5 from week 1 to week 2, but there's going to be movement here at the top of the list. You had Texas taking on Alabama, and a lot of people nationally all week long sat there and said, "Hey, Alabama, Alabama, Alabama." Nick Saban hasn't gone 3 years in a row, like 3 consecutive seasons at Alabama without winning a national title. Think about that.
That's amazing.
And how crazy that is. That is a testament to him.
Yes.
And so if you lean into history, you think, well, he hasn't won it the last 2 years. This seems logical that they'll put it together. And they still might. But I looked at this Texas team. They lost the first and the third draft pick overall with Will Anderson Jr., Bryce Young, real Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. They lost their running back, who I picked up in fantasy. He's playing for the Detroit Lions, who looks in Gibbs, looks amazingly fast. And the thing is, when you lose a quarterback, it's tough. And I knew that they had issues, Schlegs. Whenever you're bringing in a guy after spring ball now with the transfer portal, that means you've seen what you had through the winter, you've seen what you had through the spring, and you already knew what these guys were for a year or two, in Ty Simpson and Jalen Milroe, and you choose to bring in Tyler Buckner. Now, I think Jalen Milroe played okay. He's an incredible athlete, and he made some really good throws. But this Bama team, I don't think is as talented as they've been in the past. And I feel like the water around them is rising with Brian Kelly being LSU, despite the fact that they lost to Florida State a couple of weeks ago. You look at what Kirby Smart's doing at Georgia. Like, you look at how good Arkansas, Jimbo, they struggled obviously at Miami with A&M. But there are other teams that have a lot of talent now that have good coaches. And Texas beats Alabama 34-24 in Tuscaloosa. Yes. How surprised were you by that?
I really didn't know a lot about both the teams. I did know exactly what you talked about, Bob, and to everybody out there, it's the same thing that Ohio State's dealing with, is that you have a new quarterback. And again, all ball at all levels is all about the person that has the ball in their hand the most, which is the quarterback position. And so when you're replacing that and you're in week 2 going against a veteran quarterback, meaning Quinn Ewers has been there for a year, right? And in the system, and Stark's 3rd year there, right? You're going to have a competitive advantage because he knows the system. Here's the thing that surprised me the most, and it's something that I expect to see Ohio State defensive line do. They affected that man all game. I mean, like, first off, every parent that's out there, I forget his name, DN, he played lacrosse in high school, was an All-American lacrosse player. He's playing DN.
Number 9?
I don't remember what his number was.
Oh, he had a single digit.
Play multiple sports, kids, because 1, it makes you a better teammate. 2, it makes you more athletic. So but they were relentless, man. Like, what was the thing? They had 5 sacks, 9 TFLs, 4 quarterback hits on top of that through 27 attempts. They were getting after his ass the entire game. That puts pressure on you. Yes, he made some plays, but they won that game up front. Then Quinn Ewers, again, was at Ohio State. And like, everybody's like, well, he could have been here, I transferred. All right. And I can speak of this, man. The trials and tribulations that you go through only make you better. Joe Burrows was at Ohio State for 3 years. When he signed his contract, he talked about the 3 years while sitting on the bench and how that. Like,
how many Joes are there?
Joe, yeah, exactly. Joe Burrow. I'm sorry. I always do that.
All right, put the S on there. It's good.
No, I know.
Hey, he's so good.
There's so many.
There's many of them. Although everybody in Cleveland this week, hey, Joe Burrow hadn't had success against the Cleveland Browns. I mean, we know that.
We know that. But, I mean, he talked about that. So when you allow trials, right, and you handle them the right way, It produces perseverance. And at the end of the day, you become mature and complete, not lacking anything. And guess what? He stepped up. The deep ball was fantastic. Starr called a great game. They had a ton of over routes where he play action, threw across the field. He made all the throws, but the defense rose up and they affected Alabama. And that was the difference in the ball game, Bob. And that, again, to me, that's what I want to see at Ohio State defensive line. We don't need to bring all the people. You and I both know, like, I love playing man within a zone. Man within a zone is a very, very, all we did was play field 8 defense at Ohio State for a long time, Bob, and we were very successful at it. We stopped the run, and we would play sprinkling man there every now and then, but you can play really good defense that way. And that helps your DBs, right? Because the D-line can get there. So anyways, that being said, that's what I enjoyed watching from this game. What are your takeaways?
Yeah, the defensive line. That's what my dad told me. I'm watching this. He's like,
yeah,
Texas won that game up front, which I knew you were going to be able to tell in the first 2 possessions of that game how it was going to go. Because Alabama was talking about they're big, they're physical. And what's the narrative always been on Texas Schlegs? They've been a little soft. They have great recruits. They have great players. It is the most populated state in the nation with the best football. And I know California is bigger, and there's some other. I think that's probably the only state that's bigger now, but they don't have the developed football
population.
Yeah, but they don't have the GSF to give a crap factor about football the way Texas does.
They do not.
And so you're getting elite players. It's just your program, like your mentality. And what I saw up there were dogs, dude. Like guys that were relentless. Like the hungry dog gets the bone, man. Like Jaden Milroe, that's like they tape the T-bone to the side of his head, and you put a couple four starving dogs up there and said, "Go get them." And those guys were relentless the entire game. And so when you saw it earlier, like they're not beating them up front. And I know Texas has skill dudes. So now if we're just going to go skill for skill, because Bama has always been an offensive line driven team, defensive line driven team, just like Ohio State when they've been good. That's always been the difference. That everybody can talk about receivers and running backs and DBs. You go look at the best teams over the last 25 years in college football. They've got an efficient quarterback, but what it comes down to is a quality offensive line and a relentless defensive front of like 7 or 8 guys that can just get after it. They stuff the run and they can attack the pass. And that is what you saw with Texas. For me to Texas to be back, they need to win that game. They just need to be in it, and they need to show that they weren't going to wilt. And Bama, I would say, they bent them in the second half. They broke them late in the game.
Yes.
And so Texas, I would say, is back. Now they have to prove to me that they're not going to lose a game in Texas Tech or lose to Baylor or someone else like that later in the year, because they're going to have some issues.
Oklahoma.
But yeah, and maybe even Oklahoma, who's looked pretty good here through the first couple of weeks. But there's obviously some other games that we got to talk to in the Big Ten East. So we'll keep it quick here. Penn State, Downs, Delaware. Drew Aller looks pretty good again. He's an Ohio kid. How concerned should we be about a guy who's like 6'4", 6'5", pretty athletic quarterback that they're going to be taking on here come end of October?
Yeah, I mean, be concerned, right? I mean, it's October 21st when you play them at home, and they rush for 315 yards against Delaware. I mean, they're doing to Delaware what we should have done to Youngstown State, or the expectation, right? I mean, again, this is Ohio State. So, the expectation is, 6 for 9. We had a PI. It should have been a touchdown. We got one called back. We were 5 for 9. No, man, go. We talked about it last week, man. You don't need Cialis to get up for this game. Go take their soul. I didn't see any soul taken out there, Bob. So Penn State, they did what they're supposed to do. They rushed the ball for 315 yards. Drew Aller, great, 204 yards. Come in, we got to be able to stop the run, make them one-dimensional, and then you got to affect that man. I don't think the size matter of the quarterback, but still, the up front, our 5-star dudes up front had to play like 5-star dudes. That's it.
I like it. Michigan State, bounce back season for them. They've got a lot of stuff going on. They face number 8 Washington this week. Mel Tucker has been suspended now. Who knows if he'll be there the rest of the year. They obviously have some massive issues, Schlegs, that they're going to be dealing with.
Yes.
Their over-under was 3.5, some places 4.5 most. They've looked better than I thought early on, but this is a massive blow to this team with Mel Tucker, these accusations, and the fact that he is now suspended. And I don't think he ever coaches for the Spartans again.
I can see that too, Bob. You guys got to remember too, I was a strength coach. I've been in this profession. And whenever I hear anything like that, I automatically think about the entire staff, because in football as the head coach goes, the entire staff goes. So I'm already thinking about those guys. And same thing with Northwestern, right? All those guys are going to be looking for a job. Hey, side nugget, make sure you have multi-year contracts every single year, okay? But that being said, they're going to have Penix Jr. They faced him at Indiana, right? But he's a different animal now at Washington. It's like, man, why couldn't they test?
He's got better players around him, Schlegs. That helps.
100% it helps. And they're going to his strength. So, yeah, they're going to have their hands full. But I think Michigan State, because of all the turmoil now, is definitely going to be, fourth rung moving forward throughout the rest of the season.
One of the other big games that I was keeping an eye on, and they had a lot of stuff they had to battle with their weather delay. Notre Dame downs NC State 45-24. Yeah. Game was pretty close going back and forth early on. Notre Dame pulls away late. Looks pretty good. They were able to throw the ball down the middle of the field. Sam Hartman had struggled against NC State historically when he was with Wake Forest. A lot of weather, wet, sloppy field. Did a pretty good job. I think this Notre Dame team is good. Ohio State will have their work cut out for them. I still think they should win that game, but there are going to be some issues surrounding that they're going to have to monitor. So I've been tracking this Notre Dame team. I thought this would be their biggest challenge, and it was, but they were still able to reach it. But they're a team that I don't believe is perfect and complete in any way, but we still have more to see from the Buckeyes. We will see that from them with Western Kentucky coming up. So we're going to preview that game, talk about what WKU brings to the table, what Ohio State needs to do in their last big, quote, tune-up game before they take on the Fighting Irish. We got all that coming for you on the Bobby Carpenter Show, featuring my man Anthony Schlegel right here on the Big Play Network. And here we go again. We have one more game to take on this Saturday. It's going to be a 4:00 kick. Okay. Ohio State in the shoe. I think I'm going to be down in attendance for it this week. May take the kids over, Schlegs, and
that'd be nice.
Get them down on the field, see what's going on before the game. But it's going to be their final big tune-up task. And I do like this because, defensively, Western Kentucky, they might not be as good as Youngstown State. But offensively, they will pose a challenge. Now, not in the run game, and Youngstown State definitely wanted to run the football. So There's some things that need to be cleaned up. And Notre Dame, like we know Marcus and, how similar he is to a Luke Fickell or a Jim Tressel, and he's going to want to run the football, control the pace of the game, the tempo of the game, all of those different things. Like, that's all going to be real. But what Western Kentucky can do is talk about throwing the football and challenging the defense. Their quarterback, Austin Reed, 336 against USF, 253 against Houston Christian, but they threw for 300 yards as a team. This team can air it out. And so as you talked about Igbenusson, as you talked about Hancock, and then Denzel Burke, who looks to be better than he was his freshman year, and he was very, very good. This is going to be a big challenge for this Buckeye defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those deals where you know what they are. I mean, they've rushed the football 122 yards in 2 games. I mean, they do not want to necessarily rush it. And so I think that time of possession game is going to be a little bit different. But how can they still control the clock? Short, intermediate passes, right? Screens. They're going to make them run. They're going to make them run all over the field. Jailbreak screens, tunnel screens. I'm telling you, man, they're going to be making the defense run sideline to sideline, doing that kind of stuff. That's how teams that throw the ball run the football. So we're going to see that. The biggest thing too is if they're passing, like how can I get our hands up? But we need to get some passes.
Do you think this will be a big? You talk about throwing the ball a lot, Schlegs. Do you see this being a big opportunity then for sacks, or is this a game you think the ball will be coming out on time and on rhythm?
I think it's going to be coming out on time and on rhythm simply because they're going to want to control the clock, and that's how you can do it in a passing offense. Now, how do you stop that? You get them to 2nd and 3rd and long. Then you can pin your ears back because they have to go vertical if you want to get a first down. So defensively, Bob, you got to be great on 1st and 2nd down. That's just like everything, but it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be making tackles in space.
So they've got to tackle in space, and they feel like they've done a pretty good job of it. The one issue that I was concerned, a couple of things defensively, we talked about the pass rush. I don't know if you'll be able to blitz a lot against Western Kentucky. Felt like they didn't get there with 4 nearly enough as you wanted. And then conversely with that, I felt like the secondary was playing a little soft against Youngstown State, and a little more cushion. I understand, last year giving up the big plays, but the one thing with this defense is it feels like they run a lot of man on the back end without a lot of help. And I'm all for man coverage, But if you're doing that, you have to get pressure because your defensive backs can't hold up all day. And so the linebackers, you've got to force them maybe on coverage, maybe a little bit more. They need to help bracket, need to help maybe do some things, maybe some too high man, where for those you don't know, you're playing 5 underneath, you're 5-on-5, your corners, your nickelback, your 2 linebackers playing guys, and then maybe 2 high safeties, maybe even single high with a safety coming across to double someone. Like there's other things that you can do, but it feels like when they've run some man, they're not getting pressure. They're not really blitzing. And, they've got spies down low, but also with that, you're kind of hanging your secondary and your safeties out. So those guys were playing a little bit soft on Saturday. I'd like to see them play a little bit more aggressive here this week.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Bob. There's a couple of plays early in the game where you saw a guy 8 yards off the ball in man coverage, and but the sticks were at 8 yards. Like, why are we doing that? I did not understand. And to your point, Bob, if you do play a little man within a zone, like you're talking about 5 under 2 deep, what it does is if a quarterback sees man, he's like, okay, I can take this shot right now, 1-2 and go, because it's going to be one-on-one coverage. But if they're bracketing and they're playing like quick, they're closing that gap. So if a Mike has to take 3 really quick, right, or a tight end, or he's looking at that slot receiver and he's going to him and rerouting him, that disrupts the timing, which allows the pass rush to get there. And so if you don't do those things, they can be able to take it and get it out on rhythm. So you got to help the D line a little bit with what you're doing in the back end.
Absolutely. And so we'll see if they can do some of that, change some things up. And I think they've been purposefully pretty vanilla the first couple weeks. And I don't think it'll be a lot different this week. Hold some things back for Notre Dame on both sides of the ball. And we'll get into some of that with our fan questions. Do you feel like this quarterback competition is over? Like, do you feel like Kyle McCord has kind of won this thing based upon what you saw out of both of those guys on Saturday?
Hey, listen, man, I'm just like every other fan, and I'm going to speak for the fans. I hope so. This man should play as long as he has to make sure that he's on point for Notre Dame. Honestly, it's his team. And Bob, you know what? Kudos to you. Like, you've talked about it all the time. There's not that big of an athletic difference between Kyle and Devin.
I try to tell people thought Devin Brown was like Lamar Jackson, Michael Vick, Randall Cunningham, you pick whoever it was, like all rolled into one. I'm like, he's a good athlete. I'm not besmirching his athleticism, his ability, but Devin Brown is a good athlete. Kyle McCord is just a little bit behind him. And it's not like Devin gives you a substantial difference. So then it comes down to the pocket game and what you can ultimately do there.
See, let's talk about it. So he had that one really good 4th down play, right? Remember when he scrambled out and he got the 1st down, and he threw the ball. That's great. But you know what? One thing I saw Kyle do, he read the defense. He stepped up in the pocket. And Marvin had that one where he progressed from his left. Bam, bam, threw it. And it hit Marvin right in the hands, right? And he dropped it. Honestly, that's an anomaly that will never happen again, probably in our lifetime at Ohio State, but it did happen. So where one guy can escape the pocket, the other guy can read and go through his progressions. And that's what you want when you're at Ohio State, coming off of the C.J. Stroud. And again, more importantly, doing what our head coach and play caller likes to do, which is throw the ball vertical. Like, it's all about timing. And so anyways, he's the guy. He should play as long as he has to where we look good. The reason we didn't score more versus Youngstown State, Bob, is you took him out of rhythm. They should have just kept rolling, man. And that's what and again, I believe they were doing that because they said, hey, we're going to give you time. We're going to give you an opportunity.
Well,
and go ahead and talk about it.
You need to develop backups too.
Absolutely.
Like, we're talking about the young guys getting in, CJ Hicks, Devin Brown. Like, these guys need to play.
They do.
So that's an opportunity. It's just tough when you haven't really named a starter. So people think that that's still an audition. If something happens to Kyle for a series, like, Devin needs to go in and be functional.
Yes.
Like, you need to have a quarterback that can get in the game. So that, I think, is one of the things I would anticipate him getting 2.5 quarters in this game. Hopefully he doesn't have to get more than that. And then you get Devin in there and let him take the last 1.5 and see what he can ultimately do. I want to look at this. Ohio State Schlegs, I believe, favored by 28.5 points. You like that? You like him covering that? I feel like that's the first game I feel better about a cover, because I think our defense will be able to hold them down. And I feel like we should be able to get 42 points, 45 points. And I don't anticipate us giving up more than 10, hopefully.
I like where you're going with that, Bob. And it's solely on the fact that I think that, okay, there's 2 things. One, can our offensive line, so Western Kentucky, God love them, they played USF and Houston Christian. I didn't even know that was a school. And I'm from the state of Texas. However, they have 6 sacks this season. We have 2. They have 6. and it's all from the DB. They are going to bring pressure.
Yeah.
So that being said, can we block? Can we pass pro? Which I think we actually do a pretty decent job of pass pro, and that will open it up. So to your point, I think that we will play improved pass coverage, and I feel more comfortable taking 28.5.
Yeah, the over under total points, 65.5. I don't feel great about that because if we're giving up more than that, I don't think we're covering. If we're scoring, that's over, because I feel like we'll be in that 49 to 52 range, and I would like to think we'll keep them in that 9 to 14 point range. But we'll wait and see how kind of all that shakes out. Schlegs, how do you feel about maybe a potential total point over under 65.5?
I go under.
And it doesn't seem like Ryan has pushed the offense as much this year as he has in the past. And subsequently, I feel like the defense has been playing a lot better. And so it seems almost like he is trying to coach more of a holistic game where you're leaning into the offense to supplement the defense, the special teams, the things that Tress used to do. That's when you transition from an offensive coordinator to ultimately being a head coach. It's not about stats. It's not about numbers. It's about winning and playing complementary football. And it's one of the things that I used to listen to Bill Belichick talk about all the time. Coming up, we're short on time here for the show, but we're getting to one of our best segments yet. It is the fan questions, the stuff that you want to know. We are going to answer. Schlegs and I, coming up next, the Bobby Carpenter Show featuring Schlegel on the Big Play Network. What'd you say? All right, we have our favorite segment now, the questions from the listeners, the fan questions. We'll get right into it, Schlegs. Benny the Jet, 2017. Who had the best hair flow?
Oh, my gosh. All right, so, Bob, I'm going to answer this question. So, very simple. Bobby Carpenter had the best flow, and here's why. A.J. Hawk's hair, very thin, super thin back in the day, okay? My hair, very thin. I mean, like, I got a hat on, but, like, it's not super thick. There's not a lot of body. I got to put product, and I got to kind of poof it up a little bit to make
Fluff
it look.
You need a good fluffer is what you need.
Listen, who doesn't, Bob? Okay? So, that being said, your hair naturally had a lot of body to it. And I was quite jealous of
very
it.
girthy.
Like, yeah, very girthy. Who doesn't like girth and body in a hair? You know, and you had all that. So you by far had the best hair flow. My hair looked a lot like
my wife said.
Yeah, you had good hair flow, man. Absolutely. Good blood circulation.
I appreciate it. Yeah,
You're
absolutely.
welcome.
The circulation, Schlegs, is what really thickens it up, gives that nice feel. I'm just happy at 40 years old, man. You and I, at age, even both have hair, because age looks like it was fading early on, but it got a second wind, and it's really it's hung tight, man. It's NKOTB. It's hanging tough, Schlegs, and he's looking good right now on the McAfee Show. There. Question 2 from Southern Buckeye. Am I wrong in thinking the last game was Kyle's second game with major minutes, but it was only Devin's first game with major minutes? So to compare them as apples to oranges, if Devin gets major minutes next game, should we see a level up like Kyle did this week?
Okay. Bob, why don't you take that one? I'll go after you.
Well, here's the thing. Kyle's played for a while, and he's been in the offense, and he's more comfortable. I don't know if you're going to see this jump from Devin like you saw from Kyle. And I think part of the thing with Devin, I think he's actually kind of settling in now and finding his rhythm. And, he's not this huge. I think Devin's a bigger personality naturally. Kyle's a little bit more reserved. And so sometimes when you have that, like, I wouldn't say you're self-conscious or about it, but like, you're not really the starter, but you kind of are. And it felt like last week he kind of let it go a little more. Ryan said, hey, just let it go. I think Kyle at this point in his career is a more accurate passer than Devin. I don't know, Schlegs, if 1 week changes his ability to become, a more accurate passer. Devin's a gamer, and we saw some of that, but I also watched him throw some balls like, I wish I had that back.
Yeah, and here's the deal. When Kyle threw that ball from the far right hash to Marvin Harrison Jr. on the far left hash, I think it was for like a 15-yard gain. That's a big-time ball throw. Okay, so listen, the other thing too is these guys that we all talk about, that we all love, like everybody, like Brian Hartline and Ryan Day, They get paid to evaluate talent. They have all of spring. They have all of camp. They have game film. They're watching the eyes of the quarterback. They know exactly who they are. So let's trust that, okay? Like that's the thing. There's not going to be another jump. The dude is Kyle McCord. That's your quarterback. So let's play him. Let's get some continuity, and let's go knock some people's faces off.
That's right. Your blue collar and corn fed Schlegs.
Blue collar, corn fed, knock their junk in the dirt. Thank you, Roger Schlegel, Jock Doc.
Absolutely. PhD Schlegs. Don't forget that.
PhD. That's facts.
Next question here from Ben. Call sign at Bun of Man. I know that you'll like that, Schlegs. Absolutely. Some man buns.
Who doesn't like man buns?
Better to have a tight end than a loose end. Remember that.
Facts.
Is this our real offense and defense, or are we just putting the bare minimum on tape based upon our level of competition? Should Day give up the play calling to Hartline? Is blitzing both linebackers every play considered a scheme? This is from, quote, the armchair DC that I
love it. I love you, man. Whoever, listen, great question.
Bun of man, Schlegs.
Lots to unpack there. Should he give up the play calling? No. Why? He's the freaking head football coach. They were number one in offense for so many freaking years. All right. And you love it. You craved it. Okay. You just embraced it. Oh my gosh, we're the best offense of all time. All right. Now, quarterback transition, give up the play calling. Stop it, fans. Okay. And I got you. I'm one of you. Stop it. All right. He call plays as long as he wants to till they fire him. Okay. So that's one. Two, is it vanilla? Should we be blitzing? I'm with you. I don't think we should be blitzing all the time. You freaking play Youngstown State in Indiana. Like, get pressure there. Play some more zone. Like, I'm a man match zone guy. That's my favorite because I think you can play really fast. The principles are super easy and get home with 4. Because if I play better coverage, the quarterback's going to hold the ball that allows sack spot.
Well, I think with that, unpacking a little bit of this, I think they are keeping it fairly vanilla. Remember, this is also the same Ryan Day that against Georgia, people said, hey, this is the best called game I've ever seen. Look at what he's able to do. Look at him let loose and play. And I think right now, our guy DeVere Posey said, it was a great line. When your kid turns 16, you don't let him drive to Chicago. Like, I mean, like let's kind of ease some of these guys into it a little bit. And I feel really good about that. Hartline, I think, can call plays, and he's probably heavily involved, and he might be calling a decent portion of these games. No one really knows kind of how that's going right now. And then as far as the defense, blitzing both backers, they put so much pressure on their secondary, and those guys are good. I don't mind if you blitz it. If you're running some man, they call it, delayed blitz, trigger blitz. If your running back stays in, you go add into the pressure so that he can't chip on a defensive lineman or can't get out in a route. But mix it up, run a little bit of zone. But I do like some pressure with those guys, but it doesn't need to be that much. It seems like so much of the stuff turns into man-to-man down the field that it puts an inordinate amount of pressure on the secondary. And so that's my only question is, those guys are really good. You know who I'd like to see blitz some? Sonny Styles, because Sonny Styles is a beast. Bring him off the head of the slot, bring some of the guys off the edge, get Tommy in coverage. Steele played running back. Steele can play coverage. He's all right. I would get a pick against Georgia. Those guys can do it. So let's ultimately see them do that as well. All right, we're going to take our final break of the show. We'll give you our parting shots of what we think about the game, what we expect about WKU, anything else that happened in this week in college football. All that coming up next, the Bobby Carpenter Show on the Big Play Network, featuring my guy, Anthony Schlegel. All right, here we go. Parting thoughts, Schlegs. One of the other questions we didn't get a chance to: best trash talker you ever played against?
You know me, Bob. I never talk trash. I never heard anybody talk trash. I was too busy getting the defense, trying to set the front, trying to communicate. Like, listen, man, I'm a 4'8" guy. Okay, like I don't have time to talk trash. I don't have time to listen to people talking trash. I'm trying to get set so I can put myself in the best position to make plays.
I would say our guy AJ might be one of the worst. With all that, he was atrocious and terrible. Two of the guys who I thought were really good. Troy Smith, really good trash talker from our time in practice. Troy was filthy. Dante Whitner, also surprisingly good trash talker. Because Dante was like this big and like a little pit bull, just up there like chirping at you all the time. He was like kind of like Mike Hart in practice, but just a good athlete at that point in time. CJ Stroud, NFL debut on Sunday, 28 of 44, no touchdowns, no picks, 5 sacks, 20 yards rushing. When you're getting drafted that high, Schlegs, you're going to a bad team. And it seems like that's about what we should expect out of him in his first year.
No doubt. And it's going to be like that. I mean, I was there with Trevor Lawrence, and I'm going to give you a side nugget, but parting ways. Trevor Lawrence, we had Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew was a personality. Gardner Minshew was an alpha male. I absolutely love him. They ended up trading him. Why? It was Trevor's team. That was the right thing to do. You just got to give it to him, right? It's Kyle's team. And that in and of itself gives you a little bit of confidence, a little bit of moxie to take over the reins. But yeah, it's good for CJ. This is what's going to happen.
It's called growing pains. You're going to learn through it. I mean, no one's expecting Houston to win the South, the AFC South this year. You know, and so the question is with this, it's the benefit of any lasting scars that can impact his development, where like you're just getting beat up so much that you get gun shy in the pocket and you want to get rid of the ball, or you're always trying to feel a rush that isn't there because you've been sacked 70 times in a season, versus playing through some of those things, learning it, figuring out how it's going to go, and learning from your mistakes like Peyton Manning did, and so like Trevor Lawrence did, some of these young guys early in their career, and realizing there's going to be some growing pains and different things that are going to happen. So that's all part of it. We got a big weekend though coming up. WKU, Western Kentucky. It is the final game here before they take on Notre Dame. And man, that is going to be a big one. It's going to be in South Bend. There's going to be a strong Buckeye presence. Like, so I know this week everyone's going to be locked in trying to figure out this quarterback situation, everything that's going on. There's so much to happen. Thank you for joining us one more time on the Bobby Carpenter Show, featuring my man Anthony Schlegel right here on the Big Play Network.